We'll start. Oh, we forgot it. Okay. I do have my contact phone number up. My name is Michelle Kleiman. I'm one of the public health educators at the Rockland County Department of Health. I happen to be a registered dietitian and a certified dietitian nutritionist in the state of New York and a lactation counselor. I do work for the Rockland County Department of Health for the past 20 years, and that is our phone number there, 845-364-2500. rocklandgov.com/health is where you can find other information about the health department, including where to get your COVID-19 booster or your flu shot, or information on food safety at restaurants, quitting smoking, diabetes information. Actually, November is a National Diabetes Awareness Month, so just another plug. This came about, and the title is Your Food Choices Make an Impact on Your Health and the Health of the Planet. With the information I present this evening, I just hope my focus is that it might assist you in making informed decisions to guide your dietary and shopping needs. Okay. So I'm going to go to the next slide. So here's our learning objective. We're going to learn about, I'm going to move it down a little bit. I apologize. Learn about simple ways your food choices may make an impact on your health, and as I said, the health of the planet. So my reason for doing this is in Rockland County about 2.5 years ago, during the beginning of the pandemic in April of 2020, we started working on obtaining food for food pantries. There is no food bank in Rockland County. However, we have almost 46 emergency food programs. And we were also focusing on food rescue, meaning preventing food from going into the waste system, obtaining and collecting food from our supermarkets and grocery stores, because previously it was used to be picked up and then sent to Cornwall, New York, which is not in Rockland and Orange, and then our food pantries would have to go there and pick it up. And as you know, that with the cost of gas and people time, and also the precious time with produce, because produce is perishable. And we were looking at ways to decrease food waste. And that's what really brought about a lot of my thinking towards this. And then earlier this year, I took a class in environmental health through SUNY Albany School of Public Health. And it really made me aware of my waste and how I can make an impact on our food system and also decrease the waste that myself and my family puts in our garbage. So changes that we can make as consumers. And that's what I'm going to present this evening. Being a dietitian, I'm always going to tell you more fruits and vegetables, delicious, nutritious, but now I'm giving you another reason. So this is so timely because last week there was a study published in the Nature Sustainability Journal, and it's called The Environmental Footprint of Global Food Production. It is so new, I can't even get a copy. Even being a SUNY Albany student, they wouldn't let me have one. So I'm hoping it will come out soon. But this is the abstract, is feeding humanity puts enormous environmental pressure on our planet. These pressures are unequally distributed, yet we have a piecemeal knowledge of how to accumulate across marine, freshwater, and terrestrial systems. Just think about how, that picture I had there is actually from the Spring Valley Farmers Market, but how that tomato or how those green beans or how those blackberries get to you and your table and your family. Here, we're going to present some detailing information about greenhouse emissions, freshwater use, habitat disturbance, nutrient pollution, And we're going just to talk about some things that we can do. Move down. Okay. So what is sustainable diets? The concept of sustainable diets combines a food system plus a healthy diet for our growing population, while reducing its environmental impacts and staying within our planetary boundaries. More than physical health, I'm focusing to take a perspective to consider the environmental impacts. Consistent health analysis of commonly proposed diet are scarce, and approaches that are based primarily on health rather than environmental objectives are, with a few exceptions, are really rarely considered. I mean, many of you, do you consider what happens, as I said, how those blackberries got to your table, got to your stomach? Maybe not. I take the perspective of through a public health lens, and my presentation for you is the personal, on what you can do on a personal and household level. However, I consider many levels. I consider the community at large, the county. I look at that level of especially the needs in Rockland, because we have so many who are, we want to make nutrition security instead of food insecurity. We look at it on this county level, the state level. I also look on an agricultural level and biodiversity, and looking at the land that we're using, and difference in different areas such as low income, high income. There are so many aspects to sustainable diets. Interestingly, doing this research, I found that 5 countries account for nearly 1/2 of all the food system impacts. And let's say, I'm going to tell you them, but I'm sure that you know the United States is one of them. And the other 4, India, China, Brazil, and Pakistan. This seems to me so overwhelming. Therefore, what I'm presenting tonight, as I said, is mostly what we can do, our household. And I want to suggest that maybe you consider that for your next meal, or for the upcoming holidays that are coming, Hanukkah, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's Eve, that some of your choices, that you'll think a little bit differently on what you decide to serve. And even today, look, you can start making changes, small changes even tomorrow when you wake up, or you can do it tonight when you go back into your kitchen and consider what your choice is and what kind of impact you can have. And maybe you can encourage others. Oh, I went crazy. You go back up, you get a sneak preview of everything. Okay. Sorry, everybody. Okay. All right, agriculture. 11% of the 2020 greenhouse emissions. I just wanted you just to look at that slide a little bit. In agriculture is 11%, and that's definitely from the livestock, cows, pigs, agricultural soil, and rice production. We're going to talk about that. Okay. This is another one. So cattle are the main contributor to this sector's emissions, with about 5.5 gigatons. I didn't even know what gigatons was, and then I learned it's a unit of explosive force equal to 1 billion tons of TNT. Trinitrotoluene. Woo, big word, right? It represents 62% of the sector's emissions. Beef and cattle generate similar amounts of greenhouse gases. Pigs, poultry, and buffaloes, and small other animals such as the goats, have a much lower emissions, representing 7 to 11% of the sector's emissions. But global estimates of emissions by species, so I just wanted you to see that dairy cattle produce milk and meat as well as non-edible outputs. Okay, pigs do have a larger environmental cost than beef, when factoring in that much of that pig waste ends up in polluting some of the waterways. Pollution, excess nitrogen and phosphorus can cause overgrowth of algae in a short time. And these are called algae blooms. And harmful algae blooms are when some types of algae bloom large and produce chemicals or toxins, and that's called a harmful algae bloom. Maybe some of you, if you heard, it was at Lake Sebago and Lake Welsh this year. They couldn't have people go in the water because of the harmful algae blooms, because that can occur in lakes, reservoirs, rivers, ponds, bays, and the toxins can be harmful to human health and aquatic life. And that's what we have to be concerned with. And you don't get that from growing green beans. Okay. Seafood, everybody. Seafood. As dietitians, many of us encourage, and the New York and the United States Department of Agriculture and myplate.gov, I'm sorry, encourages people to eat more fish. Fish is healthy. But just so you know, seafood affects the land. I have a picture of the Seafood Watch. That's the Monterey Bay Aquarium seafood guide. And that is done regionally, but I will give you that email, that address, because I told Maria Vanessa that I would bring some of these guides to the library. And there's different guides for different areas of the United States, but I focused on the Northeast region. So the categories, so the seafood we eat raises questions about what happens here on the mainland. As I said, not just waters. The category that I happen to like, cod, flounder, and halibut, have more than 5 times the environmental impact of other fish because of the trawls dragged to harvest, and that can destroy the habitat along the seafloor. The environmental pressure was 3 times that of associated with raising sheep for meat, though that type of fishing produces 4 times more food than sheep farming does. The Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch Guide, I recommend that. The website has the different guides for the regions, and the National Astronomic Administration reported that production from wild fisheries around the world plateaued probably in the 80s, because there are fisheries around the world. But even with proper maintenance and sustainable practices, we are not going to really significantly increase the amount of fish that we had in the 1980s. The demand for seafood, everybody, has dramatically risen. Why? Because it's good for you. So current estimates is that 1/2 of the seafood eaten worldwide and in the US is farm raised, 1/2. But by 2030, that's expected to rise to 62%. So I want just to take a minute about this Seafood Watch. So it's broken down into 3 choices. So it will say best choice, good alternatives, and avoid. Actually, Maria Vanessa, I don't know if I could do a poll, but I just wanted to know if anybody's my favorite fish happens to be salmon. So the best choices, according to the Seafood Watch, says to get salmon from a farm raised from New Zealand, and avoid the salmon that is farm raised from these countries: Canada, Chile, Norway, and Scotland. So I don't know if that's news to anybody, but it's really is the best one. The best choice is New Zealand. Interesting. Something else is avoid wild Atlantic halibut. And then it said other things like bass, US farm, bluefish, catfish, US farm, clams farmed. And it also talks about swordfish, and it's from hard lines and harpoons, squid from California, shrimp, US farmed, but the other shrimp, avoid other imported sources. So that's important for you when you're food shopping, because sometimes when you see things that are on sale, and even if they're frozen, we're going to talk about this. We want to know where they're from. We want to know where that's from. So what does sustainability mean for seafood? So look at, you want to buy from a reputable vendor. When you go to your grocery store or a fish store, you want to know where they're getting their seafood. So ask those questions. So we're going to talk, so ask them, where is this from? And usually we'll say it. Did I put it up there? It will be on the next, it will be on the next one. So we're going to talk about the country of origin label. So on the next slide. And I want you to be aware of logos. I have a logo there. And doing research for this presentation, I was pleasantly surprised when I find something that I don't know, because I thought that the Marine Stewardship Council was something, you see it, the little blue in the lower right-hand corner where it says beer battered cod fillets, it will say it there. And I always was, oh, I'll look for that. That must mean they're doing it sustainable. This is a good thing to pick this one. But that was created by the World Wildlife Fund for Nature. And who, believe it or not, funded that was Unilever. And Unilever was once one of the world's largest seafood buyers. So I think that that's a conflict of interest almost. So a certification program should be transparent. So actually there is no certification program from the USDA, but that I would like to see that. I'd like to see one that should be transparent and should represent a clearly defined set of standards that are publicly vetted and easily accessible to everyone. And its primary motivation should be providing neutral and straightforward guidance to consumers. A label that makes vague claims of sustainability or being eco-friendly should not do so without being able to clearly define and support those assertions. Both wildlife fisheries and farm fish can be managed and sustainable, and they could not be sustainable. Sustainable aquaculture operations have little environmental impact because they use practices that have little environmental impact, because they use practices that, yes, limit disease, but what if there's escape from the farm fish and damage that can happen from natural habitats? So we have to be careful of those logos. Does anybody have a question before I go on? Maria Vanessa, were there any questions?
Not at the moment.
Okay, I hope I'm not putting everybody to sleep. Okay. So what is cool, right? What is that? So that is the country of origin. So question your grocer, question your fishmonger, and that's someone who sells the raw fish and seafood. Where did this fish come from? And it's right there, it says product of Iceland. If you don't see it, ask, okay? But they're supposed to have that in an area where you can see it, all right? Retail establishments such as full-line grocery stores, supermarkets, and warehouse club stores are subject to licensing requirements under the Perishable Agriculture Commodities Act. They are required to provide this country of origin information to consumers at the point of sale. Any retailer who purchases an aggregate of over $230,000 of produce per year are subject to this Perishable Agriculture and Commodities Act licensing requirements. So who is exempt from the country of origin law, labeling law? Well, if I go into a hotel and or a restaurant, I go out to eat, they do not have to label where that fish is from. If you ask, they could give you that answer, but they don't have to label that for you. So taverns, delicatessens, salad bars, farmers markets, or other similar institutions that provide ready-to-eat foods are exempt from the country of origin labeling requirements. Fish and shellfish must include the country of origin and method of production at the point of sale. Okay. So if it's farm-raised fish, yes, they have to tell you, and yes, they have to tell you which country it's from. Okay, everyone? Interesting that the US origin is derived from farm-raised fish and shellfish that are hatched, raised, harvested, and processed in the United States, or from wild fish and shellfish harvested in waters of the United States, or by United States flagged vessel and processed in the United States, and have not undergone substantial transformation outside of the United States. So imported fish or shellfish that have undergone substantial transformation will have to be labeled from country X or wherever it was from, but it was processed in the United States. Imported fish or shellfish that has not undergone substantial transformation in the US shall have the country of origin declared by the US Customs and Border Protection. I just thought that wanted you to see that. It's very interesting because ask where your food is from. Interesting, the other piece, because looking at good carbohydrates or ones that have fiber that we recommend to eat, rice, wheat, other crops, oats, just know the carbon footprint of a crop is a concern. We're going to talk about that with rice, wheat. High water and fertilizer inputs, as well as the operation of machinery for agricultural purposes, not only includes some of the soil has emissions and results from considerable consumption of energy from fossil fuels. So even that rice you're eating, interesting if it's from another country, most of it's from Asia and India. We're going to talk about that. Japan, various countries in the European Union, carbon labeling is used to inform consumers of greenhouse gas emissions generated through the entire life cycle of a product. So that's the carbon footprint, that whole life cycle, from which helps consumers select the lower carbon products and guides producers toward low carbon production strategies. And that's what we want, because we want them to use the best farming practices that are out there, so they don't have use of a lot of water, a lot of other resources, chemicals. Rice and wheat ranked in the same tier of environmental impacts as animal-based products, including cow's milk and chicken meat, largely because the growing grains, believe it or not, require so much water, but also because they're grown in massive quantities around the world, that their disturbances to the natural habitats and the ecology are very magnified. Interesting, rice uses 1,670 liters of water, and that's equal to 8 full bathtubs per kilograms, according to the Water Footprint Network. Crops used to make cooking oils, palm, canola, and other examples of plant-based food products whose impacts rival those of some of the animal-based products because they're grown and used so widely. Canola and actually in palm oil, go food shopping, read that label and see, turn over that label, and you want to read these ingredients. And if you look at that ingredients and find out what's in your food. Now, if you see palm oil, this is a concern because it is the products used that are grown and used so widely, the study found, because they use a lot of water. And it's mentioned, I'm going to mention this, but please, again, read that label. Read that label. Interesting, another fruit that I tell people is one of the healthiest ones that you can have is papaya. It is very resource intensive. However, it's not as popular as rice. So it's grown on a much smaller scale. So it's actually, its impact on the carbon footprint is pretty low. In the US, most commercially grown papayas are produced here, actually, Hawaii, California, Texas, and Florida. After that, we will get them from Mexico and other parts. But a lot of them are grown here. We have a shorter growing season. Hawaii is another big one. This is, okay. So 25% of the world crops are grown in regions with severe water shortages. Almonds, almond milk, almond flour, a lot of, look, almonds are actually very low in saturated fat. They're they have calcium, protein, but an interesting 80% of the world's almonds are grown here in the United States and California. A recent study found that between 2004 and 2015, it took an average of 12 liters of water to grow just one California almond. And the almond farmers rely heavily on irrigation and groundwater reserves to water their crops. Almond production uses around 2 trillion liters of water per year and is contributing heavily to the groundwater depletion and land degradation, according to Professor Yoshidi Wada, Deputy Director of the Water Program at the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis. I also want to say pistachios are another nut that uses a lot of water, and that's another one of my favorite nuts. The next one, and I love avocados, it takes an average of 2,000 liters of water, 10 full bathtubs, to grow just 1 kilogram, which is about 2.2 pounds of avocado, according to the Water Footprint Network, which is a Dutch organization that advocates for better management of water resources. A bunch of favorite water consumption is 4 times the amount needed to produce the same amount of oranges or kilogram of tomatoes, according to this network. In the past decade, global avocado imports increased by more than 10% annually, according to WADA. Increased demand put a strain on the drought-stricken farms and farmers in the Chilean province of Petorca. This province, the province had to resort to over-pumping groundwater and diverting water from emptying rivers. So that is a concern. So next time you see that guacamole or you see the avocado rotting, that's a concern. Sugarcane is a very water-intensive crop. It takes an average of 210 liters of water to produce one kilogram of sugarcane. The water footprint of refined sugar, excuse me, 1,780 liters of water. That's 9 full bathtubs per kilogram. That's a concern too. And we spoke about rice. And that's India's world-leading rice exporter. That's who exports the most rice. But in some parts of the country, growing rice is using up groundwater faster than it can be replenished. All right, bananas. That's a picture of a banana tree. The Dominican Republic is the largest producer of organic bananas worldwide, accounting for over 55% of the global production. But most farmers rely on inefficient irrigation methods for their production, increasingly vulnerable to intense downpours on one hand and the water scarcity on the other. So next time you're buying a banana, just make sure, those bananas are going bad. You don't want to, oh, just make banana bread, but I'd rather you really buy what you need and be cognizant. All right, let's talk about produce that requires less water. We got to go with some good stuff, right? I think I talked a little bit depressing. Tomatoes, my favorite, squash, melons, beans. Beans are adapted to drought conditions at a very basic cellular level. Jim Myers is the professor of horticulture at the Oregon State University. He said tomatoes, squash, and melons establish a deep root system and can quickly draw moisture from the deeper soil long after the surface has become dry in midsummer. There's also a zucchini variety, the Dark Star, which is bred because of its ability to grow under dry land conditions with roots that seek out that water table. So everyone, zucchinis, okay? Another one that's delicious, fiber, and the green skin. And look how pretty that is when you slice that. That can go in a frittata, that can go in your pasta, that can go in as a side dish. And that's another one, yes, you can make zucchini bread, but I really like just to saute it. Sometimes I cut it in half and I'll scrape out the seeds. And I do like to put tomatoes in there, and I'll put in a little bit of cheese. I like feta cheese, so I'll put some of that in there too. Lots of garlic, herbs, okay. All right, so what can we do at our homes? How am I doing on time, Maria? I'm looking, 7:30. Any questions?
You're doing great.
I'm doing okay. All right, things we can do at home. See this lady, she's cutting her food waste. She's really, before you go food shopping, take inventory. That dreaded freezer, sometimes things get lost in the freezer. Know what you have on hand. When I worked at the Long Island State Veterans Home, and even when I worked for Marriott's, I didn't tell you I went to school for culinary arts, and I was a chef. But for Marriott, I worked for them for 10 years. And then when I worked at the Long Island State Veterans Home as a dietitian, I had to explain to the staff there that we had a lot of inventory, and inventory is money, and it's sitting on your shelf. It's the same thing at home. It's the same thing. You could have things in your pantry, and what are they doing? They're sitting there. So look at them, see what you have on hand. There are applications you can put on your phone that prevent household food waste. And yes, that protects the planet, because planning meals before you head out to that market can make an impact on your food dollar. And I think of it like all those dollars that you just have sitting on the shelf, and prevent food waste. And really take a critical look at buying what you need, because especially if it's perishable and it's going bad, it doesn't help, because once it goes in the garbage, then you have to also, you put it in the garbage, and then we're paying for it to be shipped out. Rockland County does not have a dump. There's only 11 dumps in New York State. Okay, it has to be hauled out, and we're paying for it that way too. So we want to prevent food waste. So some of the things that the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation says: make a shopping list based on how many meals you will eat at home and when you plan to shop next. If you will likely eat out 7 times a week, factor that into your shopping list. And please be wary of the sales that encourage you to buy 2 or 3 or 4, because you get a better deal. It's not a better deal if you're throwing it out. If you can buy 2 big bags of clementines and you only eat 1 and you have to throw out the other one, where's the bargain? Okay. Sometimes discounted fruits and vegetables are no longer fresh. So that's another piece. Check carefully before buying. And if you're at the store and don't have a shopping list, you can access free mobile apps and web-based tools to shop smarter. So really commit to checking your inventory weekly. And if you say, Michelle, I cannot do that, maybe twice a month or at least once a month. Go through your fridge and your freezer and look at your pantry. I didn't realize that I had some dried beans that were the lentils. So last week I made lentil soup. Okay, and that brings me to looking at dates. And it says best by date. So let's talk about that. What do those mean? So before you toss it, You're going to check it out. And it's happened to all of us. You're looking for something in the freezer or the pantry and discover that you found, let me just move this up a little bit. You found something that you forgot that you froze. And you want to know, how long does this really last? I laughed because I had baking soda, and when I was growing up, and only till about a few years ago, I used to keep a container of baking soda in my refrigerator, and it was supposed to absorb the odors. But when I first had it, lasted almost a year. And then it lasted less than that. And then it was only lasting 6 months. The dates were really very close. So I said, wait a minute, it doesn't go bad that quickly. So those are really made by the food service companies. So sometimes that encourages you to buy more because you think, oh, this is expired, but it's really not. So this website, foodsafety.gov, really does help, because I had rice that I forgot that I bought, and it was in a can. It was from Italy, and it was a Boreal rice, that brand. It was that type of rice. And I realized if the can wasn't open when I looked at this, it can last for almost a year later than the best by date. So I was happy. Food poisoning bacteria does not grow in the freezer. So no matter how long a food is frozen, it's safe to eat. Yes, but you'll see frostbite on it. So the quality, the taste might not be the same. Foods that have been in the freezer for months, recommended, and you'll see on that time chart, may be dry or may not taste as good, but they're safe to eat. So think about that package of ground beef that's been in the freezer for more than a few months. Don't throw it out. That's one I'll make chilies or tacos with. And the seasonings for additional ingredients can really kick up that flavor. And what about the foods in your pantries? Most shelf-stable foods are safe indefinitely. In fact, canned goods will last for years as long as the can itself is in good condition, no dents, rust, or swelling. Packaged food, cereal, pasta, cookies will be safe past the best by date, although they eventually they do become stale. I've had stale cereal. Oils, don't put them on your counter. Keep them in an area where they're, I say olive oil can be in the refrigerator, but it will get cloudy and you just take it out and it will be fine. You can put it back in again, but the other oils do go rancid, but don't keep them in the sun or keep them out on your table, your counter. Put them in a cabinet. Okay, don't put them near the heat source. So I don't have them near my oven. I have it on a cabinet on the other side. Many dates on foods refer to the quality, not the safety. So look at that information that I have there. And Maria Vanessa, we can always give them a resource list too, if they want it. Okay. I have picture 1 and picture 2. This happens to be a supermarket. I was in Minnesota and I thought it looked very pretty. And I just looked at that, but what do you see the difference between, and this is at St. Paul in Minnesota. This is one of their farmers markets. I was there last month. Do you see a lot of packaging? A lot. Look at all that packaging. Where is that packaging going to go? Okay, look at that packaging. I try to say pass on the packaging. Avoid buying fruits in unnecessary and expensive, depending on the package, if it could be recycled or not. Many packages cannot be. Invest in reusable, washable produce bags. This was at the farmer's market. So as you see, there's avocados there by themselves. And then they're also, however, in that bag, they're probably a better price. But invest in some reusable produce bags. This one is, I think, compostable, but in Rockland County, there is in Orangetown a food scrap, but not, we don't, the compostable things, unless you're going to do that separately. And even if you do it separately, there's no receptacle here for that. So I would encourage anybody who has questions on that. Rockland Green would be able to help you. Picture 2, I look at those beets. Do you see those long green? That's eye candy. That is so good for your eyes, the beet greens, okay? Broccoli, I remove the stem, I cut off the stem on the sides and I'll chop it up. And I put that, when I saute things, I'll put it in my soups. These are all different color cauliflowers, but cauliflower, interesting, has a lot of leaves around it, and then they take it apart to get that. So 2/3 of the cauliflower plant is leaves that we really don't eat. And I do know Stone Barns in Westchester County, which is near Terrytown, is looking at trying to come up with some recipes for the cauliflower leaves, because that is one that people don't eat that. They eat this part of they eat the flower part, but the leaves, it's a lot of waste, but they compost it. So I say eat bottom to top or seed to stem, but there's opportunities really including those beet greens. Okay, you can saute them. There's many cooking ways for that. Okay. So, oh, I forgot to tell you, but let me go back to this. So we talked about also in Orangetown, there is the food scraps, but also eggshells. So eggshells have so many uses, but I do crush them and I put them in my hydrangea plant. That calcium carbonate, it adds to my soil there. Okay. And you can also use them. They're great to also, if you have a larger egg, you put it in half, you can use those as seed starters. Okay. And they're also good for my tomato plants. I say evil groundhogs, but they like to eat my plants. But if I put them in container gardens, and that's a very good drainage, my eggshells. Okay. And you can also check Cornell Cooperative Extension. They have master gardeners. If you have questions, please. Sometimes they do presentations at libraries. I think they have been to the Finkelstein Library, but they will answer a lot of your questions. Okay. All right. Next, some items do not need a bag. Okay. Onions, broccolis, bananas, oranges, apples, potatoes. You know, you can use your judgment. You can use the reusable produce bags, as I said, but you don't have to have those bags. There are a lot of, what about bulk? I have here. I do use a lot of glass jars. Some of the places I haven't been to in a while have the bulk that you can buy in bulk in the bulk bins. I don't buy nuts from bulk bins because nuts can go rancid, and I look at food safety because sometimes people do put their hands in things, but they shouldn't. So most experts will say that harmful microbes aren't likely to grow in the bulk bins because they don't contain enough moisture to harbor bacterial growth. If you don't feel comfortable using them, don't. Okay. So, but then you do use packaging, more packaging when you're buying not from bulk. Quinoa, also I do buy in packages, but I've seen it in bulk. Okay. All right. This is a great book I got actually at one of the libraries from the Catskill Ramapo Library System. And I was telling Maria Vanessa, and I love our library system in Rockland because it encompasses 4 counties. It encompasses Rockland, Orange, Sullivan, Ulster. And this book, I just put it in that I wanted to get it from the Zero Waste Chef. She's actually Canadian. She got a great cookbook, Cooking Without Disposables. And I put it in, and it's from Warwick. In 2 days, it was at the West Nyack Library. I picked it up. So something that I like what she said, the chef is Anne-Marie Bonneux. She said, washing dishes in containers does consume energy and water. However, so does the harvesting, manufacturing, and shipping processes that go into creating each new throwaway product. So please consider that when you're, this book is another book that I feel gives a lot of ideas for you and awareness to make changes. The other one is, this is the 50th edition. I think it was made when I was born. Diet for a Small Planet. This is a classic. This was from Haverstraw Library, but as I said, I just put it in and I requested it, and in 2 days it was at my library, my local library. Small changes can make a big impact. Plastic. I am really trying to do away with plastic containers. When I went out to eat the other night, I took my own container with me, took half of my plate that I didn't eat and put it in my own container. I brought my own. Okay. I use a lunchbox. Yes. I pack my own lunches and I pack it in a small, it's a stainless steel tin. This past year, I have to say thank you to one of my friends here in Rockland who mentioned she lives in New City and said, oh, I use cloth napkins. I'm not buying paper napkins anymore. I have beautiful cloth napkins that I was only using when my family or important people came over for a holiday. And I said, why am I doing that? I do a towel wash twice a week. Why don't I just throw them in there? And that has been my change. Okay, so think about the simple changes you can use. And going forward, well, if you look at myplate.com, myplate.gov, I'm sorry, eating healthier, half of your plate should be produce, plant-based. Think about what you can do going forward from what you heard today and where you can make some changes, who you can share this information with, something simple you can do. And that's really my presentation, but something simple. Maybe it's cloth napkins. Maybe it's looking at that label on your a processed item. If it has palm oil, maybe you'll look for one that doesn't have palm oil. Maybe you'll also look at how things are packaged and making less of an impact. And maybe going through your refrigerator and planning and looking what you have on hand in your pantry before you buy something. This book, The Zero Waste Chef, she makes her own dressing, and I have been doing that. The only thing I don't make is blue cheese dressing. But other things like you could do at home. Okay, so I think, and I have some references, but I will. These are just some of the references that I have. And I think that's it, Maria Vanessa.